Day 3 down here in Surprise, Arizona, and I'm going to tell you why these two guys were the perfect fit for the Kansas City Royals. That's next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back with another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Also, very easy to find us on wherever you get your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey. We're also on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. After shattering our 1,000 subscriber goal by opening day, we're now moving it up to 1,200 by opening day. Roughly under a month to go before we hit that. So we'll see if we get up to 1,200 in the next couple weeks or so. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors, also brought to you by FanDuel. We'll have plenty of them throughout today's episode, ranging about 30 minutes. Tried my best to get this in as a timely manner. I know last night I didn't get it uploaded till very late, hoping for a different outcome today. Sometimes the internet can be a little bit slow. Sometimes I'm just being lazy and I'm not uploading in a fast enough time. But hopefully today I should be in a very timely manner in getting this podcast out. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome. And we love new listeners here on the podcast network. Locked On, I should say. I work here in Kansas City, or not here in Surprise, but back in Kansas City at Sports Radio 810 WHB. Got a show once a week over there. Then Monday through Friday, have a show on ESPN Kansas City. So I don't just stick to baseball. Lots of other thoughts on different sports, college hoops, NFL, NBA. So if you ever want to catch me over there, easy to find me on 810 WHB in Kansas City and ESPN Kansas City. But when you click on this podcast link, you know you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball 5 days a week. It was weird last week. Only got 4. Came out during the weekend. I think we had 2 episodes on the weekend. That's rarely going to happen. Sometimes it's travel. Sometimes I'm out of town. Sometimes I'm sick. So I'm not going to be able to do Monday through Friday. But this week, shouldn't have any more hangups on that. We got plenty more breakdowns from day 3 of Surprise. Hopefully, you've been following along on my Twitter account at JohnnyJ_15. We've been giving tons of video. We've been giving some player comments. Interviewed about 5 guys today. We spoke to Matt Quatrero early in the morning. And tomorrow, a lot of the same. We're going to hear from Matt Quatrero. We're going to hear from plenty more players. There's still a couple of guys that I would like to get to. They've either not been in the clubhouse or they've been, rushing out to get to the field. So they're not late for any sort of practice or BP, stuff like that. Today, though, I didn't get the chance up at the field to see, more of the pitcher work. I think yesterday I spent more time looking at the batting side of things, the offensive side of things, watching Vinny Pasquantino, watching Bobby Witt Jr., Michael Garcia, Michael Massey, Nelson Velasquez. I spent the majority of my time over there at that field watching all that go down. Not to say I didn't see any of the pitchers work. I saw Cole Reagans throw BP. I saw Seth Lugo throw BP. I saw Brady Singer as well and Jordan Lyles. But today I really made it the point to go over there at the fields and see, just a little bit of the PFP work, some more of the bullpens. I thought for the most part that it can be entertaining to see how some of these guys interact. John Schreiber arrived today. He was out there in uniform getting some work in with the coaches, so that was fun to see. Today's first segment, though, is going to be more so focused on the 2 acquisitions of the rotation this offseason, of course, being Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo. Limited interaction with them. What I can tell you is I really do think these guys are good fits for Kansas City. I thought that, these were the right moves for the Royals. Sometimes, though, you don't get an opportunity like this. I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity before the season started to come down here with 810 WHB and get an early glimpse at some of these guys. I'm also maybe reading in a little bit too much into how these players interact. Maybe at times, it's such a initial reaction. It's kind of that first greeting. But, man, I've been so impressed with Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo, the way they interact with guys in the clubhouse, the way they interact out there in the field, and just hearing them talk, hearing them speak. These are very high IQ baseball players. These are pitchers that are very motivated. And what we've heard all throughout camp and even before camp was that Will Smith was a guy that was heavily recruiting guys to come here to Kansas City. When he was brought on, it was, what can I do to help? Who else do you want me to call? I've got past friends. I've got past teammates. I've got past friendships that I can utilize to make this team better. But I think Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha did a little bit of the same thing as well. Seth Lugo said earlier today on the program with Seren Petro that Michael Wacha was one of the first guys to congratulate him on signing that big contract with the Royals. 24 hours later, Michael Wacha joined him. And that becomes a little bit of this camaraderie here at camp that all these guys wanted to be around each other. That can be very different from what you see around Major League Baseball of assembling rosters, assembling teams of guys that don't have a background together. Not they can't get along, but you can see from time to time with teams, it takes a little bit to get comfortable. It takes a little bit for that chemistry to build. It seems right now all of these guys are so comfortable with each other. And I don't know if I was sold if Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo could really be a 1 or a 3 or a 1 and the 2 in this rotation. I understand Cole Reagans is somebody I now believe can be the number 1 and be the opening day starter. But boy, does it help to have guys like Wacha and Lugo right behind him to give you that stability. And these are guys, too, that aren't coming in saying, well, we're the veteran presence. We're going to be there to make sure we do what's expected of us. These are highly motivated guys. These are 2 guys that want to pitch more than they did last year. That was maybe one of my concerns with Wacha and Lugo. There weren't many when they made the move because I thought they were the right move for the Royals. But to me, these were 2 guys that didn't throw a ton of innings. They were around the 130, 140, 150 range. That would be acceptable, again, if they produced the same numbers. But I also think these are 2 guys that want to take it to the next level. These are 2 guys that want to throw 160, 170, 180 innings. And that is, when you're making that money, the expectation a little bit. I don't believe that J.J. Piccolo and John Sherman looked at these 2 guys and said, well, 130, 135 will be okay with us again. I think they gave them this type of money to go, we love the numbers you had last year, but let's extrapolate that over 165, 170. Let's try to add 30 more innings to your workload there. Let's try to add 40 more innings there. And we know about the analytical approach for both of these guys. We know about Michael Wacha's changeup. We definitely know about Seth Lugo's curveball. But I just can't wait to see what they actually look like in regular season form. Sure, it's going to be exciting to see them in spring training and throw an inning or 2. You just can't take anything really away from spring training. Even if guys struggle, guys look good, it doesn't really translate to the regular season. What I am fascinated to see is what this motivation turns into. More than just, I want to impress the team that signed me, but collectively it feels like everybody has this same goal. I talked to Michael Garcia shortly this morning. Playoffs was said when I was interviewing him. He wants to win enough to get to the playoffs. All these guys feel like they've got a really good chance to do that. And I think it starts with this rotation. It starts with stabilizing the entire pitching staff. I get the bullpen's important. I talked about it yesterday, how this bullpen has raised the floor and it can take them a long ways if it all works out the way the Royals envision it to. The rotation, though, I think is the meat and potatoes here. The rotation is what gives the bullpen the confidence. It's what gives the offense the confidence. And with the Lugo and a Wacha there, man, if it can all come together, those top 4. Yes, I'm leaving out Jordan Lyles in this equation just because usually not all 5 guys are in sync and they're all pitching well at the same time, and that's not going to happen really for anybody. I think there's going to be peaks and valleys with this team, especially in the starting rotation. However, to be able to turn to a guy like a Michael Wacha after Cole Reagans, or to be able to pivot after Wacha and Reagans to Seth Lugo, that's huge for this team. And I know that we've highlighted that before. We have discussed that before on an episode. It's really starting to come into shape why I think that is. These are very respected guys in the clubhouse. These are guys that have been around the block. These are guys that have pitched in the playoffs before. Seth Lugo is now a full-time starter, whereas in the past he was more of a reliever. He was a reliever in New York. He got this opportunity in San Diego to start. he was getting multiple offers from teams in the offseason and picked Kansas City because it was the best fit. Wacha, I'm sure, thought the same thing. So this recruitment has all brought these guys together and, kind of established early chemistry. And yes, chemistry that was expected playing on previous teams together. And you have, guys that keep it loose. That was one thing that was brought up in one of my interviews. I think it was either Matt Sauer or James MacArthur, guys keeping it loose. It might have been Carter Jensen, actually, that said, he loves how loose everybody keeps it here. Not that you goof off all the time, but more of a, hey, it's early on in the season. Let's make everybody feel comfortable, want to be here, all want to achieve the same thing. And we're seeing that. And more than just being a good pitcher, you can tell how much people respect Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo in that clubhouse. These are guys that are going to be expected of big things here for the rotation in Kansas City in 2024. All right, for the next thing I want to dive into, it was from one of my interviews this morning with Nick Loftin. I thought it was very interesting, one of the answers he had for me about where he's been working this offseason. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We are also on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to one of the title sponsors today in eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I had the chance to sit down with Nick Loftin earlier today and just kind of get a grasp of where he's at. I know now because of the offseason acquisitions, he's likely a guy that's on the outside looking in. Not to say that he can't win a job out of spring training, not to say that he wouldn't be the first guy called up. I just think right now with the moves the Royals have been making, Nick Loftin is one of those guys that we may have to wait a little bit to see up in Kansas City again, because he's already made his debut. That happened back in September. However, when I was talking with him and I asked him about his position, he was a shortstop at Baylor, had to move around a lot at the minor league level. He was a center fielder at one point. He got banged up when he was playing the outfield. This was something that I felt like it was important to know of where does he really like to play? Where's a spot that feels comfortable? He told me third base. Third base is a spot that he feels really comfortable at. He's come into it. It's not a spot that he's anxious to play. When he sees himself in the lineup card and he's at third base, he feels good about it. At the same time, we know that Michael Garcia is somebody that is going to take the majority of the playing time over at third base. So that blocks Nick Loftin a little bit. You look at shortstop. He's not going to get any time at shortstop this year because that's where Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be. Even when Bobby needs a day off, I'm not sold that somebody like a Nick Loftin would be there. In fact, I think they would move Michael Garcia over to shortstop and then put somebody else at third base. That could be Nick Loftin, of course. Second base, he'd have a really good chance to. He could win that job in spring training if he really hit well, and then somebody like Michael Massey did not. Then again, Adam Frazier is going to be a guy that's there. And if Adam Frazier's there, where does it leave Nick Loftin? So on top of all of this, that he likes third base, he feels comfortable at third base. He's not going to be playing shortstop a lot. He also told me, I like to be on the dirt. I feel comfortable when I'm playing on the dirt. All those positions come pretty natural to me. He did tell me, though, this offseason, one of the things that he's been working on is playing first base. If you didn't recall this, before he got called up to Kansas City, he got his first career start at first base. And yes, I think some people could look at that and say, well, all he's got to worry about is just catching the ball. He's not being asked to have a tremendous arm. Just catch the balls that are thrown to you, field the ground balls that are thrown to you. you're going to be fine there. But I think Nick Loftin has this mental approach of, well, I want to excel there. I want to be a good option there. And when I look at the Royals depth chart at first base, you've got Vinny Pasquantino. Then you have a bunch of guys who aren't first basemen. Hunter Renfroe could back him up. He's a right fielder. Salvador Perez has played first base. He's a catcher. Now, I understand Nick Loftin is not a first baseman. He's never going to be a first baseman. But if he can separate himself as the guy that you trust playing first base, as a late game replacement, or somebody that could actually start over there, that opens up a path to Kansas City. Right now, I think he can make himself valuable as a utility guy. He could be that super utility. Though Adam Frazier is a super utility guy and Garrett Hampson's a super utility guy. Those two spots are locked down right now. Those two guys are going to make the team. Nick Loftin could separate himself. Of course, having the flexibility of I can play third, short, second, first, left, right, center. I can play all those spots. What the Royals do lack, though, is a good backup first baseman. Somebody that you are willing to put on the bench to come in there and play first base when Vinny Pasquantino cannot. The option would be Nick Prado. I'm not sold Nick Prado's bat can play long term. I'm not sold that is going to work long term. He struck out 40% of the time last year. If Nick Loftin in Omaha can show that his bat is better than Nick Prado, well, then the first time somebody goes down or is slumping, he could have a spot open up for him. But I think if he can show in spring training, hey, I can really lock down first base, they're going to want somebody that can be a good defensive first baseman when Vinny Pasquantino's not out there. I don't think the smart move is just say, well, Hunter Renfroe can go there. No, Salvador Perez can go there. What if it's a late game situation and you need good defense over at the hot corner? The Royals value defense a lot. If you don't think that, just go back to the way they've assembled rosters for a decade. They value good defensive players sometimes over their bat. And I think Nick Loftin's bat can still translate to the big league level. He hit over 300 in the 20 games he was up here in September. Where it needs to go to the next level, I think, is hard hit rate. I think he was a very much a singles hitter last year. He also didn't get a big game sample size. Very, very small sample size that we have to work off of. He was a first-round pick as well. And when you're a first-round pick, there should be some level of expectation of, hey, you're not some fringe minor league. You're not some 4A guy. We expect you to be an everyday player at some point. And Nick Loftin can have that in store. Right now, he's just blocked a little bit because what he does really well is plays multiple positions as to what super utility guys usually can play. You know, super utility guys like a Whit Merrifield could play second base, could play third base, could play right field. Now, Nicky Lopez at the tail end of his Kansas City career, he got a couple starts in the outfield, but he was predominantly a second baseman, a shortstop, and a third baseman. I know Nicky also played a little bit of first base. I know Whit Merrifield played some first base. But if you can really work at it, fine-tune that approach, and become a good defensive first baseman, somebody you can count on, I think that path opens up a lot easier than if he's just waiting on being the next second baseman. There are 3 second basemen on the roster. There is a cornerstone piece at shortstop, and there is a really good piece at third base in Michael Garcia. Nick Loftin, I think, would be okay playing the outfield. I also don't really see a fit in the outfield. They need MJ Melendez to be a good hitter in left field. If he's not, then maybe Nick Loftin's path opens up through there. Center field, they like Kyle Isbell's defense too much. And right field, they spent money on Hunter Renfroe. I know Nick Loftin doesn't want to be a bench player the rest of his career, and I don't think he's going to be. I just think he increases his value by playing first base a lot more, and especially to begin the year in AAA Omaha. Now, nobody wants to talk about it, and I'm certainly not going to make a projection on this. I'll even knock on wood for it. But Vinny Pasquantino hasn't been a healthy player in his career. So we'll see. I'm not sure where Nick Loftin really fits into the future, but I do know the Royals think very highly of him, and Nick Loftin should be a guy we see a lot in Kansas City in 2024. All right, before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout-out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on free Fire TV channels app. When we return, I had a cool little 2-minute interview with Dan Altavilla, what he's been expecting at camp, and what he worked on to get this chance once again. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to our other title sponsor today in FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players with teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Get familiar with the NBA because we know March Madness is also right around the corner. And if you are cashing in on your NBA bets, I'm sure you can have some success with March Madness coming up here in about another month. And then before you know it, baseball's right around the corner. There are some future bets to make. You can pick a World Series winner, division winner, MVP winner, Cy Young winner. So many opportunities over at FanDuel. So after you listen to this podcast, go and create your account today. Well, the other guy I had a chance to interview among 5 today was Dan Altavilla. And I wanted to make it a point when coming down here to surprise Arizona to give some time to guys that maybe aren't getting the most talked about around camp. And Dan Altavilla is not a guaranteed roster spot. Dan Altavilla, by the way, is a long shot to make this team. But he's a cool story, and he's a really nice guy. And I know I say this with a lot of people, but he's very easy to root for. You look at somebody like Nick Loftin, easy to root for. Tyler Gentry, easy to root for. Across the board, this team has a lot of guys that are easy to root for. I just like the story of Dan Altavilla, somebody at one point in his career that he's throwing 98, 99, 100 miles an hour. He is considered to be one of the more high-end elite relievers in Seattle's bullpen and San Diego's bullpen. Then he can't stay healthy. Okay, so that was going to be my point as well. How healthy are you? And sometimes players will lie to you, and then you'll get this chance to see them in person. You'll get the chance to see them on the mound and see just how healthy they really are. I spoke with Austin Cox. I saw him running the other day, wanted to make it a point to check in on him. Where are you at in your rehab process? How are you feeling? How you've been throwing off the mound? He's coming off an ACL injury, and he said he's been feeling really good. He's been able to throw. That's obviously a bonus, but there's no timeline right now. The knee, it's more so of let's see how it goes. Let's see if you have any hangups. Let's see if you have any pain. And for Dan Altavilla, maybe that's the same thing. But he told me 100% healthy, feels good. In the Dominican Winter League, he was sitting about 94 to 98 miles an hour. So ramping it back up. I'm still blown away that somebody could have an arm injury twice and still sit in the mid-90s. That shows you how talented some of these guys are. And Dan Altavilla, by the way, is a minor league deal guy. Like I said, not a guaranteed roster spot, and it's a very low chance he makes this team. But he's got this opportunity to make himself valuable, make himself be seen. He had a live BP today. I thought for the limited time I did get to see him because I was out doing a lot of different things, thought he looked pretty good. He was excited about taking the mound, and what he told me was I was sitting 94, 98. Today I'll get a really good gauge, though, of where I'm at. We know in Surprise, Arizona, not only can the ball fly a lot and your exit velocity can go up, so can the velocity on a fastball. And the Royals are going to have a hard time turning down somebody that throws 97, 98, 99 with control if he shines in spring training. I mean, you can stash him away in AAA Omaha. And I think considering, the path that he's taken to get here, I don't think he would, take his luck in free agency or maybe, not want to take the minor league deal. If he doesn't make the team, he'll just become a free agent and try his chances once again. I think the Royals could find a way to keep him in Omaha, but also have him in Kansas City at some point this year. This is a guy that at one point in his career had electric life on his stuff, not just the fastballs, the slider. And what's been the talk among all relievers and starters in camp is developing a new pitch. James MacArthur's got a cutter that he's working on. John Schreiber's got a pitch that he's working on. A handful of guys are working on. Brady Singer's working on a four-seamer and a sinker. There are guys that are working on new things, so I thought might as well ask Dan Altavilla. And shocker, surprise, he is working on a new pitch. He's working on a changeup that he's been throwing since the Dominican Winter League. Wants to just clean it up a little bit here in spring and give himself another pitch to work with. And that, to me, is what has been so exciting about this camp, about spring training, about a lot of these guys. You can talk to a handful of different guys and just expect them to have some cool story, to have something they've been working on. And it's not a lie, because then you can watch these guys pitch in person and see the coaches that are working with them. And you can't lie about having a new pitch. You may not throw it as often when it gets into game action. I am excited, though, to see somebody like Dan Altavilla. I think of the minor league deal guys, I didn't think that he had the best chance to make the roster, but he certainly has the highest upside. I think somebody like Sam Long, Jalen Thompson, who has been down here doing a great job. He got some video of Sam Long, who was the minor league deal guy, came over from Oakland or pitched for Oakland last year. He was really impressive. I thought that he was more of a safe bet. Tyler Duffy's more of a safe bet. But Dan Altavilla was the long shot. He also had the highest upside of those three. And when you've got that upside, the low risk, the flyer deals, it is enticing. He is absolutely one of these guys that I'm going to be intrigued to see throughout spring training, throughout these games, if the fastball still plays, if there is still a big league arm in there. Certainly he believes so. I'm rooting for him to have some sort of spot on this team, even if it's not right off the bat. But what a great guy. What a great story. And hopefully a lot more to come from Dan Altavilla here in spring training for the Kansas City Royals. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me that follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Until tomorrow, with plenty of more reaction, interviews, and video from Surprise, you take it easy, Kansas City.